spotlight them, bring them up to the virtual stage, and get us ready for this conversation. Um, all right. So first we can have to the stage Ben Resnick from Social Current, friend of the arena, and going to be helping us talk through guidelines. Gotham Aramili from Swing Left is joining us. He's going to talk to us a little bit about ground truth and how Swing Left is using AI. Kate Gage from Higher Ground Institute is joining us and is expert on all things, well, a lot of things AI, even though we talked about it the other day that it's hard to be an expert on everything AI, but is a fantastic resource and thought leader. Steve Lambert is joining us from the Center for Artistic Action and is really sitting at the intersection of where technology and the arts meet. And so excited for you all to hear from him. And Michael Kaiser from Defending Digital Campaigns, thinking a lot about security, but also how do we enable AI. So really excited for this group and this conversation. We're talking about sort of, what are the opportunities for optimization? What are some of the potential risks? And so during this panel, we're going to sort of dive in and talk a little bit about what are some of the things that we have to understand with implementing AI, so that we can thoughtfully bring it into our campaigns, and be thoughtful users of it. Also, we're talking to voters with a lot of our work, and so how are voters thinking about it, and what are the ways that we can think about its uses throughout our work. And so I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves, and by talking a little bit about sort of their AI origin story. What is their day-to-day experience with using these tools? And where do you all fall on the spectrum from AI doom and gloom to AI evangelist? Give us a little bit of your background and perspective. And Ben, I'm going to kick it to you first to introduce yourself. Welcome.
Sure. Hey, folks. And Santiago, I have to say, I never realized this until now, but you have like a perfect podcast host voice. I want to like just listen to you speak for as long as I can get. You should narrate audiobooks. Anyway, hi, everybody. I am Ben Resnick, Chief Strategy Officer at Social Current, which is one of the leading creator strategy firms in democratic politics and advocacy. I've been working at the intersection of politics and tech for over a decade at this point, often at early stage stuff and often on how emerging tools, tactics, and technologies can either help or hurt campaigns. My AI origin story, I was at Zinc Labs, the R&D wing of Zinc Collective, in very early 2023 when generative AI really started popping off in the space. And I, along with my team, were of the opinion that if the ground rules aren't laid now, they're going to be laid carelessly or not at all. So while a lot of folks were focused on the campaign, doing that very important work, we were trying to set some guidelines that people could align with. So a few things from my time there that's relevant to this. I wrote the AI Quick Start Guidelines for Democratic Campaigns, which I hear was in the pre-read materials. So if you read those, thank you very much. And we also co-hosted, along with Higher Ground Labs, and what has now become the Higher Ground Institute, one of the first major convenings on the intersection of AI campaigning and organizing. It's been a wild road since then, but a lot of good stuff. Meanwhile, on the AI evangelist versus doomer, it's funny that I'm the first one because I actually reject the premise of that question.
Ooh.
I think that whether you have folks saying that AI is the worst thing ever or the best thing ever. They are making you buy a premise that AI is this godlike thing that should be either worshipped or feared. And in either case, that redounds to the benefit of the people who are making the models. Either they're very scary, so you should let me control them, so you should let me do what I want, or they're wonderful and amazing, so you should let me do whatever I want so that I can make all these great things happen for you. That really only benefits the people that are making the tools. I think instead, we should frame AI as an extremely useful tool, nothing more and nothing less, and it should be treated as such.
Love that. Welcome, and thank you for that perspective, kicking us off strong. Gotham, welcome.
Thanks, Santiago. It's great to be here. I'm Gotham Aramilli. I use he, him pronouns. I'm based in Chicago. I'm currently the head of technology for Swing Left and Vote Forward. Have been at the intersection of politics and technology, and I've been in the ecosystem since 2017. Before that, had a career in as an engineer and in consulting. From 2019 to 2025, I was on the DNC tech team and focused on partnerships there. A lot of work working with vendors and other folks building technology on top of kind of the DNC's core data infrastructure, supporting state parties and campaigns with a lot of different needs. In terms of my AI origin story, I've actually been did a lot of work in undergrad on AI, and it's really fun. And this will get to I really land a lot of share a lot of Ben's views as well. All along, it's been a tool like at various points in my career. I do remember when I was an undergrad and folks being like, neural networks seem like they're crazy. They're not really going to work out. Like, let's talk about support vector machines and random decision trees. And it turns out that all these powerful large language models now are built on neural networks. So it's just kind of, it's been fun to see the evolution over 20 years. So I think I go back a little bit farther on it, and maybe that also informs some of my perspective. In terms of day-to-day experience working with these tools, and then I'll get to the evangelist versus doomer piece. Right now at Swing Left, we are running our own direct voter contact program for the first time called Ground Truth. As part of that, we are using a listening script and having folks collect free text, free form data about their interactions with voters at the door. So canvassers are recording voice to text notes about their conversations. We are capturing that as free text. And then the thing that large language models have unlocked is the ability to extract structured data from those conversations. So topics that come up, entities, being able to turn that into insights that a campaign or an elected official can act on. So I think that is one of the things that I think LLMs have unlocked for us that I would love to see more folks in our ecosystem also explore. So happy to talk about that. Yeah, and on the evangelist versus doomer front, Ben stole my thunder, but I agree
Ah,
100% with it is a tool. They are very powerful tools. I think there are some people who think it can replace human thinking, and I don't think at least the LMs we have now cannot do that. You cannot completely take a human out of the loop and have them operate in any kind of way that I think is responsible or will lead you to good results. You still need a human who can think, who can verify, who can do the real work. Maybe can replace some of the grunt work there. And on the flip side, I also don't think they're going to lead us into extinction. And can elaborate on that, but I am very much middle of the road somewhere between there. So we'll turn it back to you, Santiago.
awesome. Thank you. Welcome. Kate.
Hello. Yeah, great to be with you all. So I'm Kate. I'm running the Higher Ground Institute. As Ben mentioned, kind of moved my previous work with the Higher Ground Labs team last year and been working together with them. So excited to be here. So we've been doing the kind of C3, C4 side of that, a lot around like AI support and infrastructure. I think my AI kind of origin story in this space is in 23. I guess. I don't even know what year it is. 23 when sort of the first chatbots started up. That was when we really, myself and my colleague, Oluwakemi Oso, who some of you may know, were kind of like, okay, this is happening, this is coming, what are we going to do to help our community engage on it and leverage it? And so we ran an AI cohort in 2023 with about 15 different progressive nonprofit C3, C4s to really dive in and learn about it and try to figure out what it looks like. And that was the sort of first AI work I was doing in this space. And have continued on that. We've done a couple different cohorts and trainings. We did a series of AI for campaign and organizing hackathons in 2024. As Ben mentioned, kind of worked with the Zinc team and the HCL team to do the summit back in 24, which we need to do another one of those, Ben. And been looking a lot at like what is the infrastructure that needs to support folks to be successful in their use of this. And I mean, I think echoing a lot of what folks are saying, it's not so much good or bad. It's like how you are using it and how that supports your individual and your organizational objectives and goals and values and limitations and risk profile. So I think I've been really interested, even just recently, there's a lot more. I think just a lot more tools to help people even do the thinking to think about how they want to approach AI. Obviously, folks developing their policies and their own, kind of guardrails around it individually and organizationally. Um, and so a lot of my recent work has been trying to think about what those kinds of resources can be. So stood up, I'll put it in the chat, but a couple things in the last couple of weeks around sort of resource pages that link to those types of things, an AI campaign tool guide website that transparently built on Replit, which if you're getting into the kind of Claude code, code world, which I'm, honest, personally really excited about right now. That's one of the kind of tools that'll help you kind of build out stuff. And we actually just earlier today through our first Claude Code study hall, which was we had about 8 folks, mostly from this community, mostly from organizing groups, come on. And they're people who had never coded before, never built anything, never worked in Claude Code before, and they all left having built a skill that supported them to do something, and solved a problem for themselves. So my work has always been kind of grounded in that. Like, how do we help practitioners solve the problems they need to solve, and give them the tools to support that, and equip them with that. And I think with AI, it's no different. It's how are we responding to what you all need and giving you those tools to do so, and helping with some of the critical, sort of more complicated thinking along the way.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. Steve, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. I'll try to be quick. So my background is in the arts, and like my graduate thesis, I just realized I've always been subverting technology. So my grad thesis was a video game where it measured your stress level and you competed with other people about how much you could relax in a set amount of time. And then a few years after that, I made a web browser plugin that would replace all the ads on the internet for you with art. So there was this kind of curiosity, right? And so I ended up at this art and technology center in the mid to late 2010s. And that was the beginning of the Center for Artistic Activism. So that's the organization that I co-founded. And our executive director was also there, and our other co-founder was a resident. And the Center for Artistic Activism has always been about innovation and how do we, through thinking creatively about solving problems, how can we do this better? How can we do it with less work? How can we do it in a way that's more appealing and effective? And so we work with a lot of organizations and need to understand kind of what's possible because we work in so many different contexts around the world. We've worked on 6 different continents. And I also am a professor at the State University of New York at Purchase College, and I teach programming for visual artists. So, this kind of stuff is just part of the world that I'm working in. So the AI origin story for me is during the pandemic in 2000, other artists being like, hey, have you seen this? You should check this out. And it was so early on, it was just a hassle. And it took forever to set up and it didn't do a lot. And I was kind of cool. I don't know, And as it came back into my world, I think a friend of mine said, what makes you a good programmer is being a combination of lazy and curious. So lazy, where you're this is a hassle, I don't want to do it, and curious, and that you'll find a better way to do it. Sometimes it takes more work than the thing that you thought was being lazy, but you know, in the future it might help you. So I have that lazy and curious gene, and so as I discovered, like, oh yeah, I don't want to do this, and maybe this thing could do it. That's how I started exploring. So doomer evangelist, I would say I'm skeptical. I'm like indifferent. It's very early on. To me, this is the time you're gathering information and assessing stuff, not really making judgments. There's certainly issues with AI, and real concerns, but I think whenever we are working in activism, we're gambling, like we're taking our time and effort and putting it into something, hoping that it'll pay off. And you take on risk when you do that. And so if people can take on different kinds of risk and think about it in different ways. Um, we're all deciding that. So that's, yeah, not doomer or evangelist. Sorry. I don't know if you're going to get that
Yeah,
one
I'm
answer.
waiting. I'm waiting. Michael,
Yeah,
welcome
good
to the
evening,
stage.
good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me in. I'll start by just a little bit about DDC in case you don't know us. We're defending digital campaigns. We have a Federal Election Commission advisory opinion, which allows us to take cybersecurity products from big companies, Cloudflare, Yubico, Google, Microsoft, give them to certain campaigns that are eligible federal campaigns and in a few states down ballot that are waived from campaign finance law that don't have to be reported to anyone when you take our tools. So our goal, our sole mission in life is securing the campaign layer of our democracy. And that's what we do. I'd like to say my origin story of, AI was like, I pricked my finger on a NVIDIA chip and woke up the next morning and all of a sudden things were different. But, that's not the way it works. I've been in security since cybersecurity since 2008, which is a long time. Probably a long time before most people even knew the word cybersecurity. By the way, I didn't know the word cybersecurity when I came into cybersecurity. It was new to me.
You just
Uh,
did.
and I ran and I ran the National Cybersecurity Alliance for a decade, which is the organization that does Cybersecurity Awareness Month, Data Privacy Week, and a bunch of other broad, sweeping education and awareness activities around cybersecurity. Came to DDC in 2020. But here's sort of the way that, AI is just one of many transformational technologies that people in cybersecurity have had to deal with, right? Since I started. The iPhone created cybersecurity issues, right? Every single iteration of the way devices work, the increased connectivity have created cybersecurity issues. When people switched from dial-up, to broadband, that created cybersecurity issues. Every transformational technology creates, and not even just not even like this kind, cars created issues about security, right? They all create. And so my origin into this is when people started asking me, like, how secure is AI? Like, should we be using it? Should we not be using it? Right? And our approach, my approach, and this goes back a long time, is really that security is what enables you to use technology, right? It's an enabler. It's not supposed to prevent you from doing things, but it's supposed to enable you. But you have to have eyes wide open when you go in and use it. And that is really true of AI. AI is complex, it's complicated, and it's not like easy to understand from the outside, even though it's pretty easy to use from the inside, right? So that's a interesting dynamic. I want to give just a quick kudos to Ben and his colleague Matt Hodges at when they were in their early work here, trying to like articulate the way this technology or should be thought about and implemented. We DDC just published like 10 days ago a guide, a toolkit for securely implementing AI in a campaign, and we can talk about that a bit. But so we've been giving a lot of thought to this. So where am I on the gloom and doom spectrum? I guess I always feel a couple of things about technology. One is the hyped up promise is always great, takes longer to deliver than everybody says it will, right? Bill Gates in 1981 said everybody was going to have a PC, in a short period of time. It took like 20 years really, or 19, let's go a long time before people had them, in their homes. AI is being hyped. It can do everything, it can change the whole world. We're all going to be living a life of leisure while AI takes care of everything and we'll have universal income. Yeah, okay. That's 2 centuries from now, right? I mean, if it ever happens. So I'm not on the gloom or doom scale. I do believe that I'm a little doomy in the sense that I feel that we push too hard to implement things when we're told we have to do this. This is the next cutting edge. And I don't think you have to be a first mover. I don't think that should be your goal. I think you
Mm,
should be a thoughtful implementer of the technology that you're using, and you should understand what it is. So I'm a little gloom and doom because I feel the technologists and the hypers of this sometimes win over the sensible, common sense people. So I'm maybe a little slightly to the gloomer side, but I'm also optimistic because I do know that all these things that we get are incredibly powerful tools. And just remember that these incredibly powerful tools, can be used both for good and evil,
yeah.
right? And on the security side, we tend to see a lot of the evil stuff, and we're not going to go into a lot of those details. But the way that AI can be used in to create cybersecurity problems is tremendous. Mistakes that you can make are exacerbated because of how powerful these tools are. So you just have to have that framework.
Yeah. I love that. And I appreciate the viewpoints here on this call. Not, not buying my binary doom or gloom. And I also think like the collection of folks that we have here on the call approach it in a very methodical, thoughtful way. I think going into sort of our first question, and we're going to do 2 questions really quickly, and then audience members, get ready. You're going to get to sort of break out and talk to these really smart individuals, and pick their brains even further. So if you have really burning questions on digging into some of this, like you're going to get that opportunity here, and we'll get some time and breakout. But like I was saying, like appreciate a lot of the viewpoints here in terms of like not either buying into the hype or being skeptical or being thoughtful in terms of how you're applying it. There are also a lot of actors out there who are not that, who are not as cautious. And so, we've seen a lot of deep fakes or AI slop. Chat GPT histories have been subpoenaed. Like in your all specific roles, what do you see as some of the immediate risks, and what are some of the mitigation strategies for starting to engage with this technology? And that's like we'll just lob that up in the air. Does anyone want to take it?
I mean, I can talk about risks, 2 ways. There's the risk of how it's being used against us,
Hmm.
right? Which I think is really significant. I think you mentioned a couple, like we talked about deepfakes and stuff, but I think one thing people should be aware of from a cybersecurity perspective, the biggest risk most campaigns face are phishing, are attempts to compromise accounts, right? So, what AI is doing for the bad actors, and what we've already seen in other sectors, which could be moved over here very quickly, is the acceleration of making phishing attempts really, really, really good. So campaigns are in a really rough spot because there's a ton of public information about campaigns out there. So one of the early kind of AI aided phishing attacks was a ransomware attack, not in the political sector. But what they did is when they went and harvested, thousands of publicly available financial records, and then also, were able to mimic communications better than they've been able to do in the past, hyper personalize these attacks on these companies, and then ask for a ransom based on like just crunching thousands and thousands of financial records. Like I'm going to ask, Ben's company for 50,000 in ransom because I know we can afford that, but I'm going to ask Steve for 1 million because he can totally afford that. And and so so you think about it in the political sector, all the publicly, all the FEC
Hmm.
reporting, right? To be able to match vendors with customers with dollar amounts. And then the other part of this, I think, which is really scary for me in the political sector, is being able to hyper personalize the approach itself, to be able to go and scrape LinkedIn, scrape Meta, scrape all these things and send an email that says, hey, I went to the same college as you. I was a little behind you, but rah rah for the university. And I read the campaigns, I read the candidate's position. I totally agree with him about this and that and this and that and the other thing. And I'd really love to be in contact with you. Could we set up a call? Click my calendar. I mean, this kind of stuff is what AI makes happen at scale. You could do that now. You could do that 5 years ago if you took, 5 hours, but you can do it at scale. And that's the risk that I worry about. That's what keeps me up at night, as we say in cybersecurity.
I think it's going to keep me up at night now too. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm sorry I said it, but
no, that's huge. And I think that's the thing we have to hear is like, there's how we are implementing it. What is it? What are the impacts for the type of data that we're also collecting and potentially putting into this? And is it exposing, our volunteers, our donors, key people we have relationships with?
Can I counter Michael's?
Go for it.
I got a little stressed
Sorry.
hearing that. Yeah, no, it's all right. So I'm going to try to balance out a little bit. I think the risk is like losing campaigns. And because if you can think about how to use this in a way that is like clever now, there's huge gains to be made. We're working with a group here.
Steve, you're breaking up
to
a little
this,
bit.
but they're sorry. What they're doing is there's a lot of people that are pissed about healthcare, right? Because their costs are going up, they're going to lose it. It's all happening around now. And so they're motivated, right? And so they're called the Patients Union. And so they put these ads out saying like, these are going to be your healthcare costs or whatever. They got people's interests. And then as soon as they join, they are asked, do you want to talk to this bot that's trained to like, you can tell it your story or whatever. And that's how we're going to collect this stuff. And people were like, yeah, sure. And so they were able to, and then collect these stories, get them to call their Congress people and do it in a way that, to Michael's point, is like a lot more tailored and personal. Or even just like, they know it's a robot, but when you tell your terrible health insurance story and they're like, wow, that's really hard. Like it does help a little bit as opposed to the text message formula kind of thing, right? So, so they were able to recruit all these people from red states, purple states that are going to be voting in the next election and are upset about healthcare and kind of bring them on board to this campaign. And Michael, I'm going to use your word at scale, right? Like without having to have a bunch of volunteers. And how could you do that, right? As soon as someone clicks the ad, they're like sending them a message and engaging them. So I think there's like huge potential there. And we also have to keep that in mind because I think our opposition is always creative as well. So
yeah, I think it's an interesting the balance between scale and also the opportunity to organize and get people involved, like, is a big trade-off. And is that the right trade-off that we're making? Are we, I think a lot about post 2020 and like how everything went sort of virtual, and we are feeling the effects of that on like sort of the culture of our campaigns and like losing out on some organizing opportunities. So I think there's a little bit of tug and pull on that. But I also want to sort of hear from the panel on like what are the opportunities, what are the ways you all are thinking about this to incorporate into your workflow, and I think also ensuring that we don't lose the human element, the human touch in our work.
I can speak to that. A lot of the stuff that we're doing at Social Current right now related to AI is figuring out when and how it can integrate into folks' day-to-day lives. And to start with a risk really quickly, I think this is building on both of Michael's and Steve's points. Really, one of the greatest risks is that
Hold on one second.
Yeah,
All
that
right, we're
wasn't
good.
it. Is using this technology thoughtlessly or stupidly? Like, there's a couple like the really bad example of what Steve just described, which I think is a really good usage, is using like hooking up generative AI to Twilio texting service and just like having AI chat bots that are aggressively texting random voters and not disclosing that it is a chatbot. That is actually a pitch that I heard recently, and it's like you couldn't come up with a worse idea for this technology in a lab. Um, but uh, so using it thoughtlessly, where you are sort of like seeing an opportunity or what you perceive to be an opportunity, and just sort of jumping on it without thinking about the implications, that's really dangerous. That's how good ideas get burned. That's how we continue to destroy the goodwill and good faith of our constituents. In terms of solving problems, thematically here, I think it's really less about AI and more about people. Like I said, we are thinking about implementation over a social current, and one of the most important questions is how do you make decisions about when and how to use AI? And I personally have a pretty simple rubric for this. In terms of like figuring out when and how AI can fall into or can like apply to your tasks. First, list out everything you do, like all of the standard things that are part of your day to day. Then ask yourself, what are the challenges that you face? Like what are your bottlenecks? What is tedious? What is time consuming? What is the thing that you would like to be doing but you can't? And then of the problems you identify, ask yourself which of those are best fit to AI, not as a solution. Not I have AI, where can I apply it? But what problems can be solved with this? So approaching AI as a problem first exercise rather than a solution first exercise is I've found very useful in my practical life, and is also very good at sort of dispelling the mystique of
Mm,
this technology, because it turns out it's good at some things and bad at others and mediocre at a lot of things in the middle, just like literally everything else. So that's like the risks and the opportunities are sort of flip sides of the same coins for me, and they really have to do with like how people think or don't think about the tech.
Mhm. And Ben, I'll drop in the chat a resource that I've really been enjoying on this that follows a lot of your decision making. I think this is a place where people are starting to be really thoughtful about both, opportunities and like helping people think it through. But I think that that's sort of a through line across this whole discussion is it takes consideration and it takes thought and it takes sort of second guessing and questioning. I forget who it was who was saying that, building things is, you have to have curiosity. A huge part of this is you have to have curiosity about this. You have to kind of ask, is that real? I mean, part of our study hall, our Claude Code study hall today was building Claude skills. And something I built last week was like a GitHub repo where people could share skills. So if any of you have built a skill in your own world that you think would be helpful for anyone else in this community, you can do a pull request on my GitHub and throw it in there. I'll put the link in, and if you don't know what that means right now, this is a great opportunity to learn. And someone asked, but we don't want to, what if someone put something malicious in there? And that's like you have to be prepared for that, right? You have to think about it. And it's an imperfect answer, but one of the answers we had was like, well, then take that code, drop it in a different AI bot and ask if there's anything malicious in it. Do a double check on it. Use it to test it, like use different models to ask questions. But if you're taking it at face value, that's where this is gonna be a problem, right? But if you are curious, if you're willing to learn, if you sort of have that opportunity to ask those questions, I think it's a really big opportunity.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that you've thought a little bit about the sort of the, you know, the use cases and the AI stack is also a great thing where you're like, what is this tool good at, and things like that. Gotham, you came off mute.
No, I apologize. Yeah, I was gonna say in terms of maintaining the human touch, I think what Ben and Kate just talked through makes a ton of sense. And maybe as like a concrete example with this ground truth program that we're running, like one of the things that this could enable. So we ran an event this past weekend in Congressman Pat Ryan's district, where both he and AOC dropped by because they were doing a tour of New York. And we ran this canvas with about 100 volunteers where we went and knocked on a bunch of doors in his hometown in Kingston, New York, and had folks record these conversations, run this listening script. And the thing that he got really excited about was like, can you analyze these conversations and then tell me the folks that I should like follow up with, like who I can close the loop on? Like they mentioned something that is an issue that came up that is something I can address. And like that's the kind of thing in terms of like maintaining that human touch. Like I was thinking about it, like would there have been a way to do that if we were like running a more standard canvas where we're collecting, survey questions, like even if we weren't in like a GOTV mode where we're like trying to turn people out, but like with a standard canvas, is there a way to identify for folks like before that without using an LLM, without recording that? And I think there will probably be ways to do it. Like you could have folks like try to code that at the doors, but like the richness of like he can see the conversation that happened, he can see the note the canvasser left behind. He has that context when he like makes that call. Like I think the ability to close that loop for folks, especially for us as like a party, as a set of as the set of people that care about like the strength of institutions and how disillusioned folks are from those right now. Like I think AI and the way that a lot of these like large AI labs and other folks are talking about it, I think will just increase disillusionment if like there's a set of folks who are thinking about the flip side of that, about how we can use that to increase human contact, to increase faith in these institutions, how these institutions can use it to maintain contact with folks and build trust. I think that's a direction that I don't hear enough folks talking about. And I think a lot of it is because a lot of folks in our space are naturally doomers about this. And so
Yeah.
I'd love to try to get people to pivot on that.
Yeah, the follow through is an interesting one because, like, yeah, I think that could have been data that was collected, but also could have gotten lost in the mix and then, like, was a hard thing to maybe act on. And, like, that goes is connected to the thoughtfulness piece of, like, how are we potentially using that to solve a problem?
Well, I just want to really emphasize what Gotham you just said. Like, on my more optimistic days around this, I talk a lot about like organizing, like holy grails of organizing, right? Like, what are all those things that we have never been able to do because of capacity, because of access, because the data sets are just too big, because we don't have enough engineers, right? Like, there's so many of those things. And your all's program, we worked with the folks down at Faircount in Georgia starting in 2023. They were in our first AI cohort, and part of that AI cohort, they came up with a similar version of what you all are running right now, right? So Janine Abrams McLean's team down there was like, could we analyze voice notes on the doors? Could we actually capture whether thousands of organizers and door knockers are learning about these people and not just learning about them as humans, but what they're saying, which is what your all's program is about. And I remember being like, that is a thing we have just never dared to dream we would be able to do. That is a thing that we have been told for, generations of organizers, like, sure, that'd be nice, but we'll take your pencil scroll on the van printout for now. Like, that's all we can do. And so the fact that, like, on my more optimistic days, I'm like, what are those things we've always been told we just, like, can't have? And, like, can we have them? What if we could?
Yeah. Ben,
That
go
ties,
for it.
yeah, no, I was going to say that just ties to a really important like concept in like campaigning, but all strategy, and that's the idea that what's measured gets managed. One of the biggest like challenges in our work is that the things that get measured, door knocks, phones called, things like that, are not necessarily the things that indicate that your campaign is working and resonating with people, which I think we saw very intensely in the last cycle. One of the reasons I'm really optimistic about this in applications of this technology is it suddenly unlocks the power of natural language. It allows HQ to have a dashboard that is containing what people are actually saying. And guess what? To capture what people are saying, you need to listen to them. So if we are, tricking consultants or whatever into listening to people at scale, that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, can
Yeah.
I just add here to, I think just even in this conversation, there are more good ideas about what you can do with AI than anybody could ever do. And I think for this space and for campaigns, the way I look at it is like you have to figure out, and I think, Ben, your rubric around thinking about it is really good, but we really have to talk to people like, how do you dip your toe in the water? Where do you start? Right? I mean, yes, you could do these big things, and if you have the expertise, or you can bring in the outside people who already know how to do it. But there's most campaigns don't have that yet, right? And they're going to end up maybe making mistakes by like people just using AI in the campaign and people not knowing what tools people are even using, right? Oh, I just drafted this. Like, where did you draft? I mean, what did you use? Where did and there are ways that people can start using AI, and I think we should talk about that are simple, that are easy, that are available, that are secure, that they can do tomorrow without having to know anything. And I think that's where, there are baby steps, and then there are big steps, and you have to learn, you have to iterate, you have to decide what works for you, and you have to move on. So I think we just remember to keep people focused on that part of it, because yeah, there are many things that could be done. But there are a lot of things that will be left on the wayside as well along the way.
Love it.
I was gonna say that that analysis stuff, and I'm going to talk about how you get started too. But um, one thing that happened, I think yesterday with us was I had this like hunch about some of the data we had, and I was like, all right, I'm going to see if I'm right about this. So I put all the data in and I checked, right, and I was wrong. But then I was like, well, now all the data's in there. So tell me what the patterns are, right? And like I didn't even have to have like the hypothesis. It's just like tell me about relationships that maybe I'm not seeing. And it made up this whole report, right? So going back to what you were saying, Michael, how do you get started? I think like the way I've learned stuff is by playing and experimenting. Now, you gotta be careful, right? Like you don't want to do that in a high stakes way. You want to do it in a low stakes way. So do it with things that don't matter, or like are low risk. But I think the way that I told our someone on our staff, like, because we gave everyone accounts, and she's like, "What do I do with this?" And I was just like, just play with it. Like, I totally trust that you're not going to mess anything up. She's our HR and finance person. Like, she's not a risk taker, right? But and she came back, she's like, I got it to do these reports. It used to take me 5 hours. So and that was after a week or two. And I think there has to be like a little bit of working with abandon, but within what they call a sandbox or whatever, right? Like, and then just like back everything up, put some stuff into it, and then play around. And like that's how you will move forward.
All right. I want to give our audience an opportunity to interact with these amazing panelists. We're going to do breakouts. You all are going to get to choose who to have deeper conversations with. If we could do a quick round robin, if there's anything in particular, dear panelists, that you all want to talk about in your breakouts. This is like open Q&A format, but we'll follow some themes maybe. See where the conversation takes us on this Friday evening. Ben, this is your pitch for
Wow.
the breakout.
First, again, the honor. Thank you. Let's see. A couple of things that I always love to talk about. One, diving more into what I was talking about, I think problem solving in the age of AI is really challenging and is an important skill in itself to develop. So, like, how do you decide when, how, and why to use it in the first place? I think AI agents, as it applies to all of this, is something that I'm actually surprised hasn't come up yet in this conversation, but agents dramatically increase the theoretical amount of autonomy and the complexity of tasks these tools can do. So, like, where's the trade off there? I think there's also a really interesting conversation to be had about like how this all ties to bigger picture innovations. And I'd also just love to hear like bottom up, like what do y'all think AI on campaigns should look like? Like you are the people most directly affected in terms of the day to day, and I'm very curious to hear y'all's thoughts on like what this actually looks like in practice and the difference between like the best case scenario and where it is today.
Amazing. Gotham,
Yeah.
quick pitch.
I'd love to talk more about a little bit more about what I just said, which is how we can use LLMs and AI to kind of close that loop, make it easier to, or make it possible to listen to folks in ways that we couldn't listen to them before, to amplify human contact instead of having it be a depersonalizing effect from AI having more prevalence. So, would love to talk through that in my breakout.
Love it, Kate.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about how we make this more accessible and how we bring more people into this conversation and what that needs to look like. Like what resources, what type of infrastructure needs to exist for you all to feel like you can play around with this or bring this to your organizations. Maybe you're the person in your org that's been thinking about this and experimenting it, and you're trying to think about how to bring that to the rest of your organization or your campaign. So I would love to kind of brainstorm with folks about how we're making this more accessible and how we're diversifying this conversation.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, like, on all levels, but you know, I've been really we're seeing this fall down across all the tech lines it always had, and that's another place where we're just really gonna. You know, I think as we mentioned, like we need to be thinking about this both in the short term around access and usage and the long term around how do we want these technologies governed? How do we want to think about movement ownership of these technologies? What do we need to be thinking about post 2026 into 28? What does 28 look like? So that's a lot of things, but I would love to kind of talk a little bit broadly about kind of access, diversification, increasing participation here, and kind of a future world we want to see for this.
Awesome, Steve.
Um, I'm happy to talk about whatever, but I also have developed this tool that we train activists in how to incorporate creativity to affect power, right? So, and we have like a 5 day long workshop, and we can't always do 5 days with people. So, I'm trying to take elements of that curriculum and make training tools out of it. So I'm happy to share one that I've made, but also talk about that kind of thing of like, how do you make, as Ben was saying, like, that knowing an outcome and then figuring out how this can fit within it and solve some problems. For us, that's like the kind of really deep training that we just don't, we will never have the capacity to do with people, of like personalized at their pace training. So we're doing that with like these elements of our curriculum. And so anyway, but you can get me on a tangent too, don't worry.
Michael, bring us home.
Yeah, not surprising. I would love to talk about how you do this securely, because that's really in our wheelhouse. But also, we take a very holistic approach, and as in our toolkit, I'm always happy to talk about what are some of the things that you need to think about before you start using AI. What kind of maybe use policy you should have in your campaign around using AI, and then, as we were sort of saying, how do you get started for people who haven't used it or wanting to think like, what can I do tomorrow? If I wanted to start doing some, like using things like notebooks and stuff like that, where people can really start using AI in a very secure and friendly way. So like to think it all the way through, and people, let's have a discussion about like thoughtfully applying this to a campaign.
Awesome. We're gonna open up breakouts now. Our panelists are gonna be pulled into their breakouts shortly. Do we have those those breakouts ready?
Yes.
Fantastic. All right. You'll
All right,
have
so
the option to be able to pick.
yeah.
Yeah.
When I hit open, the panelists, y'all will suddenly disappear and go into your rooms. Give it a few seconds because we're going to walk the participants through how to get there. So they will be trickling in soon.
Awesome. We'll have about 15 or so minutes and then we'll pull you back.
I'm back. My power went out again, so
Oh
we're
my
we're
gosh.
good now.
Yeah, the Ides of March are upon us. The I don't have to go into a lot of the details, but I will say that people have a lot of practical questions about this, right? A lot of practical. How do I do this? Where do I start? How do I manage? I'm in an environment where we have lots of people coming in, and what do I tell them about what tools we're using and not using? And so I think people just have a lot of questions, and I think they're all. I mean, actually, all the questions were great. And also questions like, can we use it for X, Y, and Z? I think are also really important questions. So I think I just, as we were ending, I think, in our group, I was just saying, at the end of the day, and I think this is a lot of echoing what a lot of the other panelists have said, is if you're going to use AI, which I think most of us would say you probably should be in some way, shape, or form, you need to be extremely thoughtful about it. You need to be thinking about it as a holistic thing within your environment. How does it match with my values? What tools are acceptable to use? What are the risks that I'm, might be taking? How do I mitigate my risks? And those kinds of things. So I think, people just had good questions.
Awesome. Steve, what was popping off in your room?
I think thing that we're probably all thinking about, which is like the where these data centers are ending up, the amount of energy they're using, these are all issues. How do we kind of do two things at once? How do you acknowledge that, maybe mitigate it in the way that you can, and then use this stuff. And for our organization, it's like whoever is working on that campaign, we're ready to help you, right? But we also have to work on our mission. And so it's like this tough call, right? Um, and then the other thing I would agree with Michael is just very practical of like, where do I go to get started? And I mentioned, it sounds like you had the folks from the Change Agent here before, which is a company that's like activist based and trying to do it better. And then there's another one called Thora. I'll put it in the chat. That is two Syrians that have ended up in Germany and decided to make something that worked for them. But yeah, there are these other companies that are popping up that I think are thinking about this in a different way too. So, but also just like I was saying before, I think people are thinking about this in the right ways, like, oh, might be able to use it for this. And then to make sure that you follow up and just give yourself time to try it,
Yeah.
and explore.
Kate, how was your room? What'd you all talk about?
Great. Talked about all the things. Yeah, this is great. And I'm going to add any of the resources folks jump into the resource page that we linked to before, but I'll drop into. Just because, again, yeah, everyone's like, where do we start? And I'm like, let's give you one place. Yeah, I mean, we went across a lot of things. I think, some around was like some of the opportunities. We brought up sort of like the opportunities around like multilingual work here. That's like really, I think something that folks really should be looking at, and some of the really interesting opportunities there. We did talk about like the like GEO, AEO, like engine optimization, which is a thing that we are going to be thinking about and putting out more on. For folks who don't know, that's kind of the concept that like we know that people are going to be asking these different chatbots and systems like who they should vote for, information about candidates, information about races, and it's going to be really important to be kind of meeting these agents like where they are in terms of putting that information out there. One thing I think we try to talk about is like that's not just optimizing for like the agent, that's also meeting people where they are, right? We know these agents are pulling from Reddit, they're pulling from YouTube, they're pulling from Nextdoor. Like those are places that campaigns and candidates should be anyway. But I think there is going to be a sort of art on that. There's some tools that folks in our community are building to be able to track the different ways that the models are talking about candidates, which is going to be a really important tool for folks in our space. And then yeah, like the ethical pieces, the climate pieces, the data centers, just we have to be addressing this from kind of all levels and acknowledging the nuances there. But no, just really excited. Folks are interested in talking and kind of open to it.
Awesome. Awesome. What about you?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in our breakout talking about the particular program that we're running at Swing Left and kind of the mechanics of it and what we're doing with LMs. But was particularly excited at the end by some of the other questions that folks were raising, for example, around how can we do more to support the Hispanic and Latino community with tools like this? Questions that honestly I don't feel capable of answering. Like there are a lot of things with this program that we still don't know. Like there are folks we're not going to be able to reach at the doors. Like how do we go find those folks and talk to them and make sure we incorporate their feedback. We have ideas, but we don't know if they're going to work. We have no idea if this program that we're thinking about for running persuasion and following up with these voters is going to have an impact, but we want to try. And so my biggest, the thing that I'm most excited about is just getting other people thinking about this and to think about all the things that we should be experimenting with and trying in order to get it to work. I think the thing that made me most disillusioned after 2024 was the number of folks that were convinced that we were going in the right direction as a party. It was just a momentary blip, or there's some things that seem like they are fundamentally broken with the way that we've been talking to voters, with the way that we've been running programs as a party in particular. And the more folks that are thinking about that broadly and thinking about that expansively and thinking about these as tools to address that, I think the better.
Ben, bring us home.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the big theme that I saw from the conversation that I had was folks grappling with trade-offs. Like, how do you strike the balance between efficiency and trusting something too much? How do you strike the balance between wanting to make your volunteers as efficient as possible, and uh, not wanting to turn them off by pushing them towards a tool that they might not be familiar with or want to use. Um, uh, and the list goes on. A lot, and the answer, like, uniformly, is something on the spectrum of, like, it's nuanced, it's context dependent, it's complex. And the thing that comes to mind for me is, like, campaigns are generally not a friendly place for nuance. They're not a place for being thoughtful and contextually dependent and making challenging, uh, even sometimes morally ambiguous decisions once you've gathered everything. Like, in campaign world, you have to make a decision right now. Everything is black and white. Everything is live or die. Everything is good or evil. And um, unfortunately, like, we don't get to live in a world of, like, moral purity, God knows, but, like, us, even in our own decision making. So how do you make an adequately effective decision in an impossibly complicated situation? I don't think it's a good answer to that question, but it's really comforting that so many people on this call are, tackling those questions head on.
I love that. And I think that puts a nice wrapper on like this sort of thoughtfulness theme that I felt coming through from all of you in terms of like how do we think about this? How do we apply it? And thoughtfulness is, I think, not only true in the AI context, but it's also true for all of the different technologies that we are interacting with. And, some of the examples that you all highlighted, like you can be thoughtless with texting tools, and we're seeing what that does to trust with our communities, the people that we are hoping to galvanize and mobilize as supporters or voters. And the same is true with these AI tools. So thank you all so much for being a part of the discussion. We have a couple of quick housekeeping things. One, panelists, how can we find you or keep the conversation going? Kate, you dropped in a link to the AI HGL. I'm forgetting now. I'm spacing on the name of it. There's more discussions that are happening, and HGL is hosting some of those conversations. There's also other resources, and so. Folks, how can we stay in contact with you all? Where can point and direct folks to? Drop those in the chat. Come off mute if you want to highlight anything. We also have a poll that we'd love for folks to take, and so we're going to do the poll now. Thank you, Myra, on the ones and the twos. Awesome. We got links for ground truth in here. Awesome. The office hours. Fantastic. the AI campaign stack is one thing that I've been super, super excited about. If you want to know what tools are out there, strengths, weaknesses, what's going on, Kate developed an amazing tool for that. It's something that I think is in the vein of things that we wished existed that don't, and was a good application. So super cool. The link is there. It's also in the Arian toolbox now. The security guidelines that Michael highlighted, we got a link to that in the toolbox as well. Yeah. Any other parting words?
We didn't talk about deepfakes. That's amazing.
More discussions.
No, I mean, I think it's great because in 2024, that's all we would have talked about.
The discussion is evolving.
Exactly.
Awesome. Kate, any parting words of wisdom?
No, I mean, I keep on adding more features to my AI campaign stack website. But most of them are like, do you have a tool you wish existed? Tell us. Like, Santiago, you and I talked about this. We're like dreaming of this like two-sided marketplace where people could be like, I need a thing that exists. Like, we'll help you. And like, let's make that real. But also like, yeah, if you are building skills that you want to share, please do. If you have tools that we're missing that are working for you, please submit them. So other people can learn from everyone's experience.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I put the drop in for the AI open mics too, which we do monthly. So please join those too if you want to hear other case studies and examples.
Love it. And with that, thank you all on this Friday the 13th. It's just about 7:30 here on the East Coast. Thank you all for your time. Thank you. Please give it up for our panelists in the chat. Show them some love. Thank you all for your thoughtfulness. Thank you all for contributing to this conversation. Thank you to the audience for joining them in the breakouts and asking thoughtful questions and keeping this conversation going. There's more where that came from. Stay tuned, apply to Arena Academy. I think we've dropped the link in there a couple of times. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, there it is, Myra. Thank you for the. All right. And it is recorded, so
I'll send you a follow-up email. Probably not today.
we will gather ourselves and the recording will go out.